Okay, so I've been asked today to talk about um, what role religion should play in our institution and personal lives, and discuss how it benefits us personally as a society,
Mm-hmm.
how it hinders us personally and as a society, and how we can best deal with religious differences.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, um,
Like alternative family structures.
yeah. So it seems that maybe this is just the framing of the question, but it doesn't seem like there is a non-religious perspective that we can look at things through. So if you are somebody that's, a non-Christian in the U.S. perhaps, right, then you probably are looking at Christianity from an implicitly Christian perspective with the various assumptions that you'll make, like a universal notion of human rights or dignities,
Mm-hmm.
equality of people, and these sorts of things. A sort of assumption that people will be monogamous in
Mm-hmm.
marriage and things like that. These are not universal cultural assumptions, right? And it seems that culture is a downstream product of religion. So um, I just kind of want to get that out of the way, right? Because religion is everywhere and always. So it's not like we can escape it. But how does religion benefit me personally? Well, I am a religious person, so it sort of fills up the meaning of life types of questions that I have in my life. It provides me with a community, um, a purpose day to day, um, and it provides me with various, social infrastructure services. If I need counseling or guidance, things like that, I can benefit from that. Um, as a society, um, I think people are better off if they go to church, right? You can look at measures of subjective well-being, and people that are religious do perform better on measures of subjective well-being. So I would encourage the church to make more steps to have more people come because it's good for them. And on top of that, it does sort of, targeting back to the beginning, it governs what the sort of rules of the culture are, although maybe implicitly. Right? So things like monogamy being the social standard is a good thing, right? If you look at cultures where we don't have monogamy, those ones are more prone to war, particularly in polygynous. I don't know how it's said. It's spelled GYN, where one man has multiple partners. That's really bad for society, so I think we should keep that.
Polygamous?
Well, yeah, polygamous could be either way though, right? Because
Oh.
it's very
You're talking
rare
about the.
for women to have
I
multiple
see.
husbands. Um,
Break that stereotype.
yeah. So I think that's a good thing. I think we should keep that. Beyond that, it was the Episcopal Church that was really, really involved in the civil rights movement of the 1970s. Right? So these were the governments that pushed their sort of mid-century Protestant theology all the way to the UN and helped charter the UN Declaration of Human Rights. Right now, they sort of maybe lost some credibility after having done that, but the role that the church played in the UN Declaration of Human Rights can't be understated. Um, so, how does religion hinder me personally? Well, Christianity has a bunch of rules of things that I'm not supposed to do, right? So, I mean, that's that hinders me. I mean, I don't always like that, but it is what it is. So, um, it sort of restricts my dating pool, and that's just something that's relevant for me. Um, what else does it really hinder me from? I can't do quite as much on Sunday mornings. I have a whole hour less, so
Oh no.
it's bad.
Such lost time.
But I don't really feel hindered by it. I think the guardrails are there for a reason, and it's sort of like putting, a fire into a fireplace rather than just letting it burn. Um, so as a society,
I love
um, it hinders us from doing a lot of things, right? I think it mostly plays out on the individual level and the individual moral level, I should say, right? Because there are plenty of things that are not illegal that are socially prohibited,
Such as?
cheating on your wife. Um,
What else? Give me just one more.
What's one more? Another thing. What's another good example of something that's socially prohibited, but I guess leaving your family behind, right? Because the church does play a really, really big role in regulating family relations. That is in a non-legal manner. So, right, you can just up and leave and things like that. So, I think it's good that those things are really, really shamed. So I think if we hinder people from doing those things via the mechanisms that the church can use, I think that'd be a good thing. What else does it hinder? Well, I mean, some people that don't see themselves as being heterosexual, that's not good for their what they would want to do. So I would say that the church can set various restrictions on what those people can do, whether or not that's discriminatory or just the plain text reading of the Bible. Depends on your perspective, but that's one thing that one way that religion can hinder society, and that's why gay marriage was only legalized in the U.S. with the Obergefell decision. But there have been gay people around since time immemorial. And how can we best deal with religious differences, especially as it relates to changing cultural norms like same-sex marriage, trans acceptance, alternative family structures, and immigration? Well, I think with respect to religious differences, I think it would depend on how different the religions are. Because there are some religions where many of the immigrants, maybe a minority, but a significant minority, say in like United Kingdom or Germany or Europe more broadly, I suppose, right, are Muslims. And there was a paper that suggested that among Muslims, they have a greater probability of being extremists in a way that would manifest negatively. I could go find the study. I don't know where it is. Not that they're more likely to take action as extremists, I should say. Not that they'll be, quote, less extreme, given that they are fundamentalists. But I think there's something to be thought about, right? Well, if a religion says that the end goal is to establish a global caliphate, and there are people that take that seriously, I think we need to think very, very closely about how we can deal with those religious differences, because those two things can't coexist with each other in the long term, especially if one is the majority and one's the minority, right? Because when it flips, maybe things could change pretty badly. With regards to, say, same-sex marriage, I think it all just depends on what you mean by marriage, because I haven't met a conservative Christian that has ceded the ground that same-sex people have been married in any ontological sense, right? They're just two gay people acting as though they are married, whereas the category of marriage is restricted exclusively towards straight people, and that the marriage, so-called, that they've acted is just a piece of paper. Trans acceptance, I think we need to do a lot more work to really understand how gender roles are going to play out within our society, because since the Industrial Revolution, we haven't really figured out what we're going to do with men and women, particularly because back in the day, men and women's lives were really, really segmented, and there wasn't that much overlap. There was men's work and there was women's work, and in medieval times, the women would pay their tax in cloth, and the men would pay it in wheat, and that would be just what it was, right? So now, in an age where we all pretty much do laptop jobs, and we receive our payment in the form of a check that shows up in our bank account on a screen, it's much harder to differentiate men from women, especially because male strength has been devalued in the economy quite precipitously in the last 100 years. And I think that one outcome of that is that the traditional notions of how men and how women should act have changed, and we don't exactly know how to deal with that, because the idea of sex being separate from gender was made in the 60s, right? So the idea that these are two separate concepts is not exactly universally accepted, and maybe it's wrong, right? It depends on what you think gender is, right? Because Judith Butler said that gender was fundamentally performative, right? And I think she's right to a large degree there. But when people are talking about trans acceptance, right, many people on the conservative side don't see a distinction between sex and gender. So when they say gender, what they mean is sex, and when other people say gender, what they mean is acting in a way that X sex generally acts. So because there's that confusion in terms, I don't know that there's any good way to have a conversation about it, because sex and gender are the same thing to some people, for others they're not. Right? I personally think that, sex is more or less binary, right? And gender is more or less bimodal, right? Because there are significant and cross-cultural differences between men and women in temperament cross-culturally. So I think those things are what generates the social role of gender as Judith Butler would define it. So, and I understand that there are people that don't fit within that social role, right? You can find very hard-charging women, and you can find very nurturing men, and we don't exactly know what to do with those people that are on the edge or even in the overlap. So, and with regards to alternative family structures, I think it depends on what alternative family structure you're talking about. Because as far as my understanding of the research is that having a father in the home is tremendously beneficial for the children. If you look at things like teen pregnancy rates and crime, right? So it's significantly associated with a decrease in those things. And I think that introducing alternative family structures in an environment where we know that changing those things could be really detrimental is pretty dangerous. So we might want to very, very slowly implement alternative family structures in such a way that we can minimize the outcomes, or minimize the negative outcomes for people that might attempt those things. Beyond that, it just seems unwise. I've looked into, I've heard about some polygamous people, or not, polyamorous, I should say, polyamorous people, and they've said that it takes a lot of dealing with jealousy and communication to successfully manage a polyamorous relationship. And I think that for many people where their communication and ability to handle jealousy is not the best, it might be good to just avoid those structures altogether. So we don't know what kinds of people are becoming polyamorous. So to sort of advocate polyamory for everyone or say that it's a generally safe thing to do, I don't know if that's the wisest thing just yet, especially because children might be involved, right? So, and how do we deal with religious differences as it regards to, well, the Bible says, one man, one woman, and you kind of stick together for life. I think that works most of the time, abuse notwithstanding.
Good distinction.
Yes. Yeah, and I don't know what the church is going to do about trans acceptance, because I don't think that they're going to say that they have the ontology of being male or female. but I think there is definitely a role for people who are trans-identified, even within a conservative context, to adopt a more nurturing role within the church. And I think that maybe would scratch the itch. I'm not exactly sure what they're after though.
Scratch the edge. You're so funny.
Okay, I think I answered all the
Yeah, I
questions.
think that's good.
I have a 15-minute monologue.